All right, let's see. I don't hear the music. I don't hear it. Oh, there we go.
Oh, yeah. With some of that sweet goodness. Yeah, baby.
There we go.
Never gets old.
Well, that's good. That's good. It doesn't, because oh, now it's playing on my phone. There we go. Well, ever since the with the new Substack video thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was a huge hit last week.
I know. So I was trying to make sure it was working, and I can't tell when it's working. And then I'm like, oh, no, it's not working. So I got it out the other computer because I realized what's wrong with it when it doesn't work, but I can't verify that I did it correctly, because it's like a unique stream key for each one.
Oh, gosh.
And I do it. And then sometimes if you stream something else in between it, they then not get all reset. I figured that part out. And, well, then I was like, oh, no, this one isn't working. I got to go get that key again. And then it starts working, starts playing. And then there's like
a slight delay.
And yeah, I'm coming at myself from multiple angles, which is,
it's like,
but that's a nightmare. You don't want to come at yourself from multiple angles.
I think we talked about this one time. Have you ever tried that app where it plays what you're saying, like on I think a 3-second delay?
Oh, yes, because you brought this up.
Oh my gosh. It will trip your brain out, man.
Yeah. It makes you think you're using drugs.
It certainly does.
And you're like, no, I'm very much sober right now. But it all just comes creeping up behind you.
I tried singing a song, and it's funny when the replay comes back to you, your brain cannot continue with its line of thought. You can't do it.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Yeah. All right. Well, so Bo.
Yep.
I have a question for you.
Is it about God?
I mean, it can be.
Okay.
That's really quickly. It's really quickly getting to the point.
I'm jazzed, man.
Okay. So, last week, everyone, we answered a bunch of questions.
Well, we responded to them. I don't know that we answered them.
Oh, I know. You're very humble. Bo responded.
Q and R, baby. Q and R.
Yes. But we did a whole bunch of questions, and there's more. But I sent Bo an email I got from a listener named Eric, who it's one of the and Eric, he came up to the live podcast I did with Grace.
Okay.
Yeah, on Pentecost, right? So and he's waiting around, to hang out, like where you can kind of get to talk to everyone and stuff after.
Yeah.
And I'm like cleaning up sound stuff, and he's like, so who or what or whatever, like, what about God? And I was like sitting there going, I'm cleaning up a sound system.
Yep.
I like talking about God.
Yeah, you do.
Like, what about it? And then he proceeds to give all these different kind of elements of stuff that he's responded to, that he's heard on the podcast, or that his experience, his conversation stuff. And I was like, this is really good. Could you send this to me? Because I'm never going to get the sound system put up. if I start responding to this, and then we can talk about it on TNT.
Oh.
And I said, plus, Bo will have a lot more practical advice for you.
Maybe.
Yeah, well, practical theologian.
I know. Look,
that's your job.
Look, Trip, I have come prepared.
Oh, he came prepared. See, I'm like always willing, to give testimony to the hope within me or whatever, but not while I'm cleaning up the sound system. So Eric sent the email, and he was fine with me saying it. So should we read sections of it, or do you want to give the gist of it? Like,
would it be okay if we started in a different place and then came to the question?
Oh yeah.
Oh, cool.
I'm good with however you think to organize it. I just wanted everyone to know I didn't want expectations for every email that I ever get sent to get a whole episode. He came to a live podcast. I didn't get to answer it there, and we talked a bit about it. And then there are a number of little questions people send in about God, not little like dismissive, but little like short.
Yeah.
And so I mentioned all those topics in an email with Bo that's like, here's also the email that start this off. So there you go.
Well, my favorite part, by the way, was at the end when he was like, hey, and if you guys don't, like, if you don't have time for this now, you and I could talk about it at length at beer camp. And I laughed out loud because I think, can I just do a PSA? I know obviously people feel very connected to you, and one of the attractions of beer camp is connecting with you and the homebrewed crew. But just a PSA, those who are organizing the event, they have absolutely 120% more to do than they could possibly get done in those 5 days. And so I wouldn't plan on that. As much as people like connecting with you, I just as your friend and partner in this enterprise, I just think that people should know.
Unless they volunteer. If they volunteer to help.
Oh, smart.
That's the easiest way.
Yes.
You might get stuck in the car with me for 3 hours picking up beer from breweries.
There you go.
You might. Who knows? And this year we have like an official after party. Did I tell you that, Bo?
An official?
know how last year
was unofficial?
Like, last year was just hanging out at the Airbnb.
Well, the podcaster.
The podcast house, which is a story in itself. But like, yeah, there's this cool place that we're renting for the after party, and
on Saturday night,
getting all the speakers, volunteers, podcasters.
No way.
I think there's space for like 50 more people or whatever. Whoa. And so anyone that wants to that's like an introvert, that wants to go, how would I be in a room of 100 people and get to say hi to whoever I want? That's probably the best way. And it's at a place with like 100 different bourbons.
Oh gosh. Hey, out of curiosity, did you get your security deposit back from the Airbnb last year?
I did.
No way.
Yes.
Well, we worked really hard on Sunday morning we did. We adulted and we got our stuff together and we cooperated as a team, and I'm so happy to hear that you got that deposit back.
Well, I'm glad y'all rallied.
Wow.
Oh man.
Lori said that would be her, so fair enough.
All right. I got in the chat on
Substack.
On Substack, we got people have messaged Kristen about volunteering.
Yay.
And someone that wants us not to waffle, and I'm not sure what that means, because
they mean
I haven't had any carbohydrates this morning.
Have you had protein? Have you had anything?
Oh, I had protein.
Okay, just
had a protein shake. Try to, I just wanted to be in the zone.
Yeah.
For who, what, nothing, God. Was just trying to get in the God zone.
All right.
And you know what zone waffles put me in? Nap.
Wow, man. Hey, Quick story.
All right.
From time to time, I have the privilege, the honor of sitting with someone who has, quote unquote, lost their faith. And this can be somebody I've known for a long time as a friend. It can be a ministry partner or even a family member. And they trust me to voice their doubts or their complete abandonment of the theological project, spirituality, everything. And it's happened enough that I have figured out, I put together like a nice little worksheet to give our conversation a framework.
Oh.
Because one of the things that I run into quite often is that when someone has, whether you call it a crisis of faith or whatever it is on their journey, and they come to that place where they no longer want to believe what they used to believe or what they are raised to believe, one of the dangers, the pitfalls that can happen in the desert of criticism, as Ricoeur calls it, is that they undertake a project. A lot of people try and call it deconstruction, but really it falls into, I think, two other categories. One is either a renovation project, which is fine. That's good. But you start with the end in mind, right? Like you have an image of the kind of faith that you want to have and you start there. Or it's a demolition or a destruction. Deconstruction is lovingly pulling at the strings of the quilt, the Afghan, the blanket, to see where they lead, to mend, to change, right? Deconstructions for me is a very specific thing. And I know people say like, oh, you're an academic, you're held up on the, the meaning of that. But the honest truth is for most people, it is demolition. They're more, here's why I say that. They're far more comfortable saying what they don't believe than what they do believe. It's far, and when I say easy, I don't mean lazy, because none of this is easy work. But it's far quicker, let's say that, to define yourself by what you're not than what you are. And so a lot of people take that route. And I don't mean to be pejorative when I say a shortcut. It's just that it's quicker. The deconstruction is a longer project, and it's more intensive and takes more energy and time and creativity. So I've come up with this little worksheet that I have found gives people different tools in their belt for whatever their project is going to be. So if it's a renovation project, fantastic. If it's a demolition project, also okay. If it's deconstruction, we'll go with that. Because in the end, I don't need somebody's faith to look like mine. And I don't know at the beginning where they're going to end up, right? It's not prescriptive. I'm just walking with someone in their journey. And I had an opportunity to do this recently, and I've been thinking a lot about it since then, about the parts that went well and the parts that didn't go well. And so I just want to say, as we enter into this conversation today, that Tripp and I, coming from an academic perspective, you philosophical, historical theology, mine being more practical theology, if we use a lot of categories and vocabulary words, I don't want people to feel like we're trying to box them in and limit them or limit the conversation. It's just that I find that there are some tools that are good to have in your belt in case you need them. Because as the saying goes, if the only tool in your belt is a hammer, you tend to treat everything like a nail. And I find that to be very, very true in the experience of being a soul friend and walking with somebody in their journey. So I just wanted to say from the beginning, we are not trying to be prescriptive or limiting or trying to box someone in or be formulaic. It's just, this is a massive undertaking of eternal importance. And so it is worth making a trip to the theological hardware store at the beginning to get some different tools in your belt so that you have, I would say, the opportunity to end up with a house you can live in, a dwelling, instead of knocking the whole thing to the ground and sleeping in the ruins. That's my heart at the beginning of this, that I just wanted to say as a disclaimer. And I have found that it's helpful to just name the project up front, and that the ultimate outcome is not predetermined, but the process by which we undertake this has some constructive elements to it that I just think are good to name right at the beginning. Lori says language is also very important.
I mean, yeah, otherwise it would be hard for anyone listening to the podcast.
Yeah.
If we weren't using language.
You know, the thing that people send to me the most is Pete Holmes, the comedian that we love, quoting our friend Barry Taylor in his most recent special, saying that God is a word blanket that we drape over the mystery to give it shape. And a lot of people find that very intriguing and very helpful. And like Pete Holmes says in his special, why am I this old and this is the first time I'm hearing this?
Yeah, the funny thing is Barry was like, that's not exactly what I said. And he took what I said and put it in the very Richard Rohr way.
Brilliant. But that's going to happen. If you have a great quote like that, once it's out of your mouth, it has a life of its own, right? Just like Jesus. Once something's out there, you're no longer in control of its life.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking of stories of, you know, those times where you like, where you just happen to be present, where someone's like talking and they're using things you said on the internet without attributing it at all. Mm-hmm. You had that experience, and then you're like, oh, this sounds familiar. Why do I like this so much?
Yeah.
And then the person's like, yeah, and God should at least be as nice as Jesus. And I'm like, oh, I guess I know.
Yep.
I guess I know where this came from.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're reevaluating the entire talk they gave to see if you really liked all of it, because now it's been associated with you. And you're like, well, I wouldn't have put it that way. That's not exactly what I meant.
Yeah. You know what I do from time to time that always makes me giggle is I'll hear something and I'll be like, wait, that sounds really familiar. And I will, because I've been blogging for like almost 20 years now.
And then you're like, I said this to Tripp once. He forgot it. And now he remembered it.
But Tripp, if I'm being serious here, if I Google Bo Sanders and then the quote, it will come right up. It's an unbelievable, when you have been writing online for 20 years, the amount of content and quotes, it's really wild.
Have you like asked AI what Bo C. Sanders thinks about X, Y, and Z?
I almost did last week, because I was listening to a show that was saying if you're not taking advantage of AI, you're like somebody who says the internet is a fad in 91.
I mean, you could also just be like genuinely concerned that it's a like plagiarism machine, uses 40 times the energy of the internet, and you don't want to be a part of that entire exploitative racket. But otherwise, you know,
have you heard this new thing on podcasts? I don't remember what it's called right now, but you could do something like you can create a Tripp Fuller character. It's an AI character, and it would go through all of your audio, Tripp audio, and it mimics your voice, and then people can type in whatever they wanted to say, and it sounds like you said it.
Yes. I had a friend make one for Jordan Peterson.
Nice.
And so he just started sending me clips of Jordan Peterson repenting for his his amplification of toxic masculinity, that he's recently read Process and Reality and has it was
funny. Yeah. I would like, if I could have one, I'd like Jack Caputo, because he has such a unique timbre to his voice.
Oh,
I think it'd be fun to have him say funny things. Oh, Lori says that's creepy. Okay.
Oh, well, look, that way when we get old, all we got to do is get the machine to generate a script that already knows our voices, and then we don't even have to talk. We could just listen to ourselves talk. I mean, like, look at me and Bo talking.
What if we had a John Cobb and we could still be in dialogue with the legend?
I see those things still, that just kind of creeps me out. Like, I got all his books. I've talked to him. I got like 40 hours of me talking to him on the internet. And he went a long time, you know. I feel like.
Hold on, Trip. I'm gonna go get something. Hold on.
I really hope this is not like an urn of a friend, or wonder what is Bo going to get? Something about our conversation with John Cobb made Bo think of something.
You are not going to believe this. I was organizing my office the other day, and I opened a Tupperware bin that I haven't opened in years. Trip, I found you and I were doing a project back in 2014-15, and I have all of the CDs of whether it's Jack Caputo's deconstruction talks. I have the first Big Tent Christianity. I have Brian McLaren's like what is postmodernism stuff. I have CDs. I have more.
Oh my goodness.
You cannot believe what is in this box. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get one of those CD things that makes it into an MP3. And I'm going to make you and I a digital archive.
Ooh.
What do you think?
This sounds pretty entertaining. I wonder how many dumb questions we asked then. Do you think?
Oh, I'm assuming all, mostly.
So because I wonder how good the audio is, because that time Caputo came and did the podcast at Claremont, whatever version I had was not that good, but it was so funny because half the room. So people don't know, Jack Caputo is like a Derrida specialist. Half the room are all the philosophy types that are very much into that. The other half were like retired clergy and missionaries from the retirement home, there in Claremont.
Yeah.
And Bo, dude, like his talk was like getting lost and to find God, or I once was found, but now I'm lost. It was like some inversion of like the lost and found image. And he was doing stuff on the teachings of Jesus. And there was a nice elderly person that's retired Methodist minister who, after 3 or 4 questions where the third phenomenological reduction, this blah 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 blah, the gift, says, Mr. Caputo, I have no idea what just happened.
I remember this,
but you said the word God a lot, but who is God? And he does his thing and pauses and says, and I assume that was not the answer you were looking for. And she goes, I've lowered my expectations tonight.
You know what story I thought you were going to tell? I remember the first time you brought Pete Rollins to Claremont. And, for those who don't know, he has like this Lacanian psychoanalytic thing. And somebody asked him a Derridian question. And they were wondering about difference. And Pete froze for a second. And then he just said, that's not what I do at all. just that's not my tent. That's not what I do. I thought it was yeah. I just love that he didn't put on any pretense because he was at a place where there were people doing PhDs in philosophical theology. He wasn't going to even try and dance with that.
Yeah, you don't try to fake it if someone's doing a dissertation on it in the room. Like anytime someone's writing a dissertation on a topic, they probably know more about it than anyone on the planet.
Yep.
For like a 6-month period.
Right.
And it's just not you just let them have it. Don't even mess with it. Even if they're wrong, they're going to think they're right and have more reasons why you're wrong so just don't.
Yeah.
Like, the moment I find anyone just finished qualifying exams and is starting their dissertation, I want to ask them about whatever they're writing on, because I think this will be the one time I get to talk to someone who knows this much about this particular topic.
Yeah.
Because once that junk gets on the page, you're just like exercising demons at the end of graduate school. It's like all this stuff you had to keep up with to finally get through it. Yeah. And you're like, oh, it's written. Now you got to go back and look at what you wrote to remember what you learned. But there's that period where it's just all has to be front of mind. And
I will often try and hang in a conversation. Let me tell you, when I hit the eject button, when I pull the parachute lever, is when somebody says the phrase, the later Heidegger, or the later whatever, meaning.
What about middle Schelling?
That's what I'm talking about. Once that comes up, I bail on that conversation. I go, I need a refill, or I just switch.
You're like, all right.
Yeah.
But later Wittgenstein is.
That's what I'm talking about. Early. The minute that something like that comes up, I'm like, and I'm out.
Yeah, well, sorry. I'm just thinking of that. I probably did this to you, and I thought you were just thirsty.
I am thirsty.
He's like,
I'm thirsty.
Later Heidegger. Oh,
yeah. Well, I'm out. Hey, who's your hot tub friend from Scotland that I met at in Denver?
Alec and Greg.
Greg.
Yeah.
So I tried to talk with Greg about his dissertation.
Oh God.
And he's writing on someone I've never heard of.
Herman Bavinck.
And he has to translate it from Dutch, I'm guessing?
Yeah.
And I really tried to show interest, because I know how important it is when you're writing a dissertation.
Uh-huh.
I know how important it is for people to show any interest at all, because like at a cocktail party, no one would talk to me. Like, right. And it was really disheartening. And so I tried my best to stay in that conversation, but I just didn't even have hardly a frame of reference, a nail in the wall to hang any thread on.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Greg, he's grew up like PCA. Is that the Conservative Presbyterians? PCA?
Sounds right.
Okay. The like Tim Keller's, they're edgy.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, God rest his soul.
And so, it wasn't until he was in Edinburgh, because they don't divide up theological faculty, doesn't really divide the same way in the UK, because everyone goes to the same school kind of thing. As opposed to in the States, you're like, oh, these are liberal mainline Protestants, these are evangelicals, or this is a Catholic school. Everyone's at the same divinity school from all religions and theological positions. So you get there, and then now if you're doing Reformed theology, Schleiermacher and Moltmann, people like this play major roles in it, as opposed to in the US, kind of where we self-select who's in or out based on our tribe, right? So Reformed theologians that are, if someone's Reformed but PCUSA, it's not like you're sitting there reading Charles Hodge or
right,
whatever. Anyway, so because we came from such different parts of the church and things, it was always fun talking, because you would never even be in the same school in the US, because I wouldn't be allowed to teach somewhere where he'd gone before, because I wouldn't have signed off on the faith statements, right?
Oh.
So now it's led to where when something comes up for one of us that's in the other one's wheelhouse, we'll text. So I'm like, do you know who so-and-so is? And it's always like some conservative person on the Gospel Coalition website that posted something that's tangentially related to me. I'm like, why is this guy? Who is this guy? Or then like he's doing this project on like Christology in the 20th century or whatever, and like he has random questions like where does Bart talk about this or Bonhoeffer talk about this, where he's like done whatever you do in an intro class type thing in grad school.
Oh man.
And you know, he's like, let me ask my friend with the complete works who I'm like, oh well, what about this, so I'd like to tell him he's my token Calvinist friend, and he promises to never listen to the podcast because his other buddy who you met at camp had listened to it before he got there, and he's like, oh no, it'd ruin my witness, you know, if I was listening to your podcast. We can be friends,
right?
I just can't really let you influence me. I was like, oh, thanks buddy. But okay,
yeah, let's talk about God.
I know. So you have an agenda of how you want to frame this. So I'll follow your lead. I have a few things I thought about, but
okay. How about I just tell the story, and then we can do whatever we do, and then we'll go to the email as our test case.
All right.
Our case study.
Okay.
So here are some big words.
Ooh.
And you don't have to use big words. You can write, because I've done this without the big words. But here are just some big words put down on the page as a starting point, because this is the important thing to me. I'm going to say this like 50 times today.
Okay.
There is no neutral position, right?
Okay.
Because all knowledge is located or situated and mediated, you're always coming from somewhere. And so there's no objective position. You don't have like a quote unquote God's eye view, right? We have commitments and priorities. We're coming from somewhere. We have a story. We have a language. We have vocabulary and concepts. So there is no neutral. So it's really important in the process to just, for me, name where you're coming from. So the 5 things that I put down on the page right away is ontology, or the ontological, metaphysics, or metaphysical, hermeneutics, or hermeneutical, epistemology, or epistemological, and ethics, or the ethical. And in the course of just saying, like, let's just map this out real quick, just tell me where you're coming from. And you don't even need to be able to defend it. I'm not going to grill you or disqualify you. I'm not looking to dismiss, right? Be dismissive. I want to know how we're doing this. Okay. So I'll give my example. So if you were to ask me to do this little worksheet, here's how I'd go about it.
All right.
When it comes to the ontological,
okay,
I just love knowing that there's something called Kantian dualism, that you have the noumenal, real, which we don't have access to, and the phenomenal, or phenomenological, and that's what we are dealing with. And for me, it just starts with a humility that says there's more going on than I could possibly perceive, measure, explain, articulate, diagram, quantify. And there's just a humility as a starting point for me that what I'm dealing with is the phenomenon, belief in God. And that's going to be my starting point for whatever data or that I bring to the table. Is I just love knowing that that's out there, that there is this noumenal, real, which I wouldn't have access, none of us do, and a phenomenological. And I'm going to start with phenomenology. I'm just going to start with, what have people believed before? What do people believe now? What's been my experience, right? I'm just going to start with the phenomenon. Okay, so that's my starting point.
And does that then entail, like, so the epistemology, you'll make the same distinctions Kant makes in the 3 critiques?
I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to do that.
Oh, okay. Anyway, sorry.
No.
You gave categories, and then I'm sitting here, I'm like, so wonder how he's going to differentiate ontology and metaphysics, because there's just debate about how you would even differentiate the two or call them the same.
Yeah.
And because the distinction of phenomena and noumena is primarily a distinction about reality as it is in itself, based on the limits of knowledge of the knower, as opposed to the structure of being itself.
Okay.
Which would be like ontology proper, is like to talk about being, but Kant's like, you just can't talk about being.
Right. How would you do that?
Yeah.
So then the metaphysical question, I've moved pretty far away from metaphysics because as a former charismatic, I have just bankrupted the concept of the supernatural. Like it's a
good,
right? It's a modern development.
Endorse.
I don't like conceding that anything that's God's is not natural, especially if you have a God of nature. No, Laurie, he is letting me talk. He said I'm driving this thing, so I'm telling my story. So just knowing that there's a category called the onto-theological or onto-theology is helpful for me. That in the age of reason, so after the Protestant Reformation, right, Enlightenment, all that stuff, God, I'm going to paraphrase Caputo here, God had to come in to the court of reason with hat in hand and explain himself, because not doing that great of a job, right, with evil and so many other things. So I just love knowing that there's something called ontotheology. And for me, a pin that I can put in the project and so as sort of a holding place is Tillich's concept of the ground of being, where you just say, God doesn't exist. God is that which allows all things to exist. God is the ground of being. And so a lot of people who are believers still don't like this because they say it sounds like the Force in Star Wars. They don't really like, but here's the thing, as a placeholder, it gives me an anchor that I can tether to temporarily while I do my other work. It's like building when you're framing, you'll put in a beam to anchor to the side while you do some other work until you get the structure sound. Okay. So it gives me a place just as a holding spot. So then I want to talk about hermeneutics, and that's like interpretation. So for me, recur, surplus of meaning, right? That there's more going on in any symbol or text than can be explained, contained, right? That there's a surplus of meaning. I come from more of a narrative concern where, like, when I read, let's say, a gospel, and the fact that we have 4 of them in our canon, I want the story. I want to say what's going on in the narrative, right? So I try and let each genre do its own storytelling. And so that's sort of my hermeneutic, is like, right, but what's going on in the story? And part of that is because I really like sort of a post-structural playfulness of saying, like, well, we know how it works, but this is like the structuralist, once we diagram and outline how it works, then can we start to play with it? Can we move things around? Does it hold together if this variable is changed? And so ultimately it's led me to be what in the academy is called a social constructivist. That's my philosophical commitment. And so those are the lenses through which I read things. And then epistemology, how you know things. As a Methodist minister, I have access to something called the Wesleyan quadrilateral. So we do prima scriptura, not sola scriptura. So we start with scripture. Then we go to reason, or tradition. How does this come to us? We do reason, because we don't want an unreasonable faith. And then we do experience. And the integration of experience is twofold. Our experience informs our understanding, and our understanding informs our experience. They're mutually beneficial. And so for me, epistemologically, like, that's a really helpful tool to just put down and say, like, we're going to do this quad. We're going to do these 4 things. And then the last thing is I have an ethical commitment to whatever it was. I call it a poem. Whatever poem Jesus vocalized and was imagining the dream of God.
Poem, like
Yeah.
Poem?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think the kingdom is a poem.
No, I for a
And
second, I thought you said balm or palm, and I was
oh,
like,
well, I'm getting stuffed up. I guess I can hear it. My allergies. I don't know what's going on. I'm feeling very stuffed up. So, Trip, I don't know if you've ever heard of the concept of God as the poet of the world, but I've really taken to this idea that Jesus's dream, God's dream for the world, the kingdom, that it would work a different way, is a poem in which we wake up and find out that we are a character in the poem. So,
and are you and these kind of 5
yep.
areas? So when you will go through these with individuals when they're trying to figure out, renovation, demolition, deconstruction,
Yeah.
and
So I'm sort of a soul consultant.
yeah, no, I'm just thinking of the I have a thing kind of like that. I do, and it's so different because I'm always worried that if I start using certain words, then they're like, oh, this is not helpful. Why did I ask Trip for a vocabulary lesson?
That's true. And thank you. And so let me put an asterisk on this. I have done it without the big words.
Okay.
But the most recent conversation that I had the honor of having was with somebody who had an MDiv. And so knew some of the words, or at least the concepts. But the frustration this person had is they felt like I was trying to label them all the time. And I had to keep saying, not trying to label you, but here's the thing. So let's do ontology or epistemology. There's no neutral. So what are we doing? Are you a physicalist? Are you an evidentialist? Are you a humanist? And I'm not trying to box you in with labels. I'm saying, from where do you stand to make this observation?
And so part of providing the language and helping them locate themselves is so that they're like whatever their natural intuitions are for their personality, experience, and such get named, right? So, and one of the ways that I think that helps is like, and psychologically is, most of us aren't transparent all the time unless putting effort into the why we think what we think or whatever. But our intuitions about our conclusions will then latch on to something to point to justify it. Right. And so getting clarity on something like that, you might actually discover like, what is the question that I'm wrestling with?
Right.
Because otherwise you might have an intuition because of, say, all the public sex abuse problems in the church and stuff that you're like, then this must be wrong. And I'm going to point to that. But underneath, this is the issue that's going on. And so,
and for this person, you're 100% right. And for this person, the issue was the Bible was not what they were raised being told it was.
Yeah.
And in Bible college and seminary. And so it became, what can I trust? Because I think this is all horseshit. And when I look at the patriarchal nature of organized religion or institutional Christianity, it seems to me that what we have has been manipulated and given to us by people who wanted to stay in power. So I don't know what I can trust, and I don't know that what the tradition that came to me is of any value. So if you use the Wesleyan Quad, I can't trust the Bible. I don't trust the tradition. I'm going to use my reason, but I want to explain away or come to understand my experience. Like this person said, I just think I was manipulated. And you're like, okay, good. We're getting somewhere, right? Instead of the initial question, which was, it seems to me that all of you, meaning me and you, and people like us, you just mine out of the Bible and out of the tradition the things you already like in your preconceived priorities, and you just harvest or mine out of the tradition what you want to justify what you already wanted to do ahead of time. And like, why is that even worth doing? Why not just walk away from the whole thing? That was the real question. And so for me, it's a really simple answer. Oh, I don't want to be doing any of this. Like, this thing about like caring for others and turning the other cheek and all this kingdom dream, I don't really want to be doing any of it. You know, it would be far easier for me as a large-bodied, able-bodied, cisgendered, straight, white, educated man to not do any of this. So it's really not accurate to say that I just go into the tradition and pull out what I want. This thing calls to me at a deeper level. And instead of making God in my own image, right, which is why I put Feuerbach in the Masters of Suspicion, I add him to the Rushmore. Instead of just projecting a big me onto the screen of the heavens, I recognize that actually I'm nothing like God, and God is so different from me that it calls to something else in me and is not a project of convenience. It's the least convenient thing I can imagine doing is trying to be conformed to the image of Christ, allowing myself that the Spirit of grace would inform me, form me, and transform me into something that I'm not in my own nature, by nature.
Yeah.
So that's my little story trip. And I want your feedback.
Well, what happened in the conversation?
I ended up.
Oh, I guess
I can tell you this.
Okay.
I ended up loaning this person, Elizabeth Johnson, She Who Is, and Quest for the Living God. Mm-hmm. And I said, just do me a favor. You don't have to read them all. Just check it out. Because I think what you are agnostic about is the patriarchal God, the big guy in the sky. And I just want you to know there's a different way of thinking about that and conceiving that. And you don't have to subscribe to it or give me any feedback at all. I have no expectation. I just want you to know, it seems to me what you are atheistic about is the patriarchal Father God. But there are lots of other ways to do this.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we are in that process right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So, one of the things that I found, and you're kind of getting people using nerdy categories to locate oneself, when I found when someone comes to talk to you about it, which is real different than like they just happen to be listening to something or someone shared something,
Right.
I like that cool quote from that Pete Holmes thing that was on a meme. But if someone goes to you to talk to about it, there tends to be at least two dispositions to the question that show up.
Okay.
It's already narrowed to thinking I should talk to Tripp about this, right? Mm-hmm. So that's already self-selecting. Mm-hmm. And one of them are people that are wanting to know whether like is my concept of God, like, is it worth the word God? Right. So they've had these kind of more properly deconstructive experiences. And then the content of the concept has changed so much. It's like, do we use the word God for it? Right. And there are lots of different ways. And I think one of the natural tendencies of a lot of our peers is to deflate theological concepts so that more people get to play with them, and and over time, not from the academic context, but from really the more congregational space, I came to think it makes much more sense to like not use the word God for something less than, right? Like one sense is like a vision of an immoral deity or whatever, like those kind of using it for something less than. But this came up in a conversation with Sarah Lane Ritchie, was on the podcast maybe 2 years ago, in what was one of the most popular episodes that year. And we called it the minimal viable God concept.
Okay.
And where it's like, if you're going to use the word God, when there are plenty of other words you can use towards something gesturing towards ultimacy or ground that don't require God. She was like, I want God to I want God to actually be something like personal, transcendent in some way, and provide, a horizon of hope, something that's there. And I found all three of those things rather helpful. And I could imagine personally changing my mind about something where I wouldn't use the word God, just the same way that we've talked before, like where if I wouldn't serve the Eucharist if I didn't believe X, Y, and Z anymore. Even though I would have no problem participating in the Christian tradition or whatever. And so, like, to me, what, like, a lot of people just start to deflate what the concept means, to allow a lot more people to use it.
Interesting.
As opposed to have it something. And and to me that came from the ways in which confidence in an ultimate reality got significantly stronger for me over the course of theological education, especially after getting more invested in the science and philosophy conversation. And so, a lot of the popular debates about God and such seem they seem rather trivial, and miss the fact that, like, there are just certain questions that we have that we can't answer in any like explicit way currently empirically. And there is the structure of what it means to be human of some sorts, like the kinds of questions that have shown up cross-culturally. We have these cognitive mechanisms that generate these kinds of like ways of relating to life, meaning, and value. And so, like, there's a whole lot more when it goes to the question of God, kind of begging the question than any particular religious tradition. And but oftentimes, right, take the example you just gave, God gets attached to some very specific account of ultimate reality in a very specific part of a given religious tradition, right? So whatever we talk about God, and is now essentialized to the part of a particular religious tradition I have a problem with, right? And so, like, think of, oh, well, God couldn't be personal because there's this anthropomorphic version of a deity in my tradition that's just, oh, he's not riding a horse in the sky. But that's not or you could go, oh, well, evolutionary psych means that human beings evolve with these cognitive mechanisms to do X, Y, and Z, and that's why we have this. None of those like things are actual dismissals of it should there be an ultimate reality. It's relationship to personhood, not like the particularities of being a person, right? And anyway, there's like, so to me, that one of the fascinating things about this conversation, which shows up in your study if you're a clergy, is there's already been this giant filter from, is there an ultimate reality, right, to some particular expression that has burdened them, where maybe pain, trauma, doubt, question they carry, now goes, I don't know if I can mess with this concept. And I think one of the gifts, something like what you're describing, or read Elizabeth Johnson's what's the image? The campfire image she uses in the book, not She Who Is, the other one,
The Quest for the Living God.
Quest for the Living God. Yeah, and where there are all these different visions of the divine just from the 20th century that have emerged, and there are all these different voices around the campfire. Like to go like, oh well, the conversation about God is very different than this, or the conversation about even Christianity, like let's say that's part of the way down the funnel, is real different than pre-lapsarian reformed ontology. You know what I mean? Like, and yet our encounter or experience of the divine is, like you said at the beginning, always situated, always historically bound and such. So it's not surprising that we have a hard time differentiating how a particular symbol has been enacted on us in our life from that which it refers to in itself. But that's one of the gifts, I think, of both the apophatic and the cataphatic side of thinking about God, is that they're both there. A lot of times that the other thing I'd say, like when people ask what is God versus who is God, oftentimes you get traditional religious asking who, and more theoretical version of it is what. But they actually both, I think, if you think of how they relate to the negative theological tradition, the apophatic, where God cannot be fully described, and then the analogical references to God being possible, the cataphatic or the positive theology, there's something to be gained in framing the question either way. But I found in the study of sorts, like when, not the study of things, but like when they come talk to you in your office, be it students or things, I found at phenomenological aspects of existence to be the starting point most helpful, unless you're a nerd where they want to do the minimal viable. Why would you say this? How would you layer this scientifically? And there, I would talk about the dimension of reality that describe, how do you articulate a world that includes this dimension of existence that we all value, something like depth, the future, freedom, beauty, truth, mystery, these kinds of things, and all those experiences that are contained in what it means to be human, generate the need, I think, in the past for us to talk about something like God, right? And so by starting with those experiences, like which of these is most essential or important for your own experience in humanity, it becomes a way of thinking about God that resonates with kind of universal human experiences, and they necessarily transcend traditional religious limitations, but they resonate with them because like we would recognize, like all of those experiences, whether they're in or out of a particular tradition, are situated and grounded. But like, I think a lot of people think the name God need not be mistaken as referring to anything alien in the deepest aspects of our common human experience. God could be understood as less as a potential object of experience than as a dimension or condition or the horizon of all our experience. And if each of us were capable of excavating the deepest layers of our desire, God, in quotes, would make sense as an appropriate name for the objective of our desire. Things like depth, like, so if you take the concept of just depth, D-E-P-T-H, it relates to that inexhaustible dimension beneath the surface of impressions that people, self, nature, society, and depth has both this sense of the abyss, like a terrifying void, and a ground, the source of ultimate support and fulfillment. And religion is cross-culturally is seen as like a search for depth, and its expression through symbols, rituals, and narratives. It acknowledges tension between the longing for depth and the fear of the unknown, that abyss and ground dynamic. And so like depth reveals the mysterious, infinite reality beyond immediate perception. It's elusive in that it's similar to the horizon that we face in any moment, but always approaching. Like depth is like something that meets us. And if we're just talking about that experience, that it was anyone, like, I mean, I've had this conversation with an atheist scientist to people of other religious traditions and things, and most people recognize that, oh, that can be a deep element of existence. In that place, like thinking of that element of existence, should we want to name it in a way we collectively relate to it, God could be understood as the depth of existence, encompassing both like the terror and solace of life's mysteries, like that, like oh, when we use the word God there, we're giving dignity to that experience. Now, there's obviously, there could be more there, but to me, each of those kind of dimensions of existence collectively like make God make more sense. Like this is what we're talking about when we talk about God. But they also, if you dwell on either one of them, don't necessarily require someone to have a shared definition. They get to actually share their experience of that in life. Does that make sense?
That's so good. The two things it makes me think of is because I'm such a fan of Ricoeur and his surplus of meaning, the conversation you were talking about 2 years ago with the minimalist, what I would just want to add is that sometimes you need to deflate the balloon to give it more flexibility, pliability, make it more manageable. And what that can allow you to do is to exit the room that you're no longer comfortable in.
Yeah.
Get it through the door. But what I would want to add is once you're on the other side of it, the constructive project is to inflate the balloon and see all that it can mean, right? So that you don't stay in a place of reductive minimalist, but that for me, the surplus of meaning is to expand the concept to the most it can mean. And like, to paraphrase Ricoeur, that a text means everything that text can mean, but it never means what it can't mean, right? And
yeah, and it also means what it will mean, right?
Yeah,
and this is like that is one of the elements of Ricoeur's, like that surplus of meaning, right? Like he doesn't want to alienate the context, situation, and author of any text, but he also wants to recognize that like the surplus is not a reservoir of the stagnant reservoir. The surplus is a generative event in relationship to it, right? And so like would Hegel ever read himself like Marx does? No. Is that Marx's reading of Hegel possible? Yes. Would Thomas Jefferson and company ever read the Constitution and think MLK's speech? That is not what was on the horizon. Was that future horizon?
Yeah.
Like when something that is new, novel, universal, or whatever, it happens in relationship to a text or a tradition, it now becomes something that was always obviously a potential meaning, but it wasn't there, right? And that has positive and negative intentions. It's how symbols live and die. If you think of it when Tillich's talking about culture, right? And he's meaning there are some parts of the Christian tradition where you wonder if this has died. How in the world does a symbol function if an executed Hebrew Lord is somehow contains within it the Holocaust and final solution, right? Is that symbol dead? Or take the example James Cone uses of the cross, right? He's sitting here going like the cross contains in America a reading where you identify the oppressed Black citizens as the site of divine revelation and a revelation of both Jim Crow and all these kinds of things, vileness of setting us against the kingdom of God. But that's not like, how would the story of Jesus ever contain that? Like if you're going, oh, well, God, Christ is Black. like, no, it only that meaning, which was always a potential in it, but it was connected to all the historical accidents that led to a transatlantic slave trade, and then the oppressed learning the religion and story and language of the oppressor, and then learning that Moses and company were like, let my people go, and then it all gets inverted. So that potential meaning was in the cross of it, but it had but it's not like it was sitting there in it. Anyway, so sorry, that's a complicated
note.
I think it's helpful because it's like the moment you recognize that our faith, right, is attached to Christ becoming Christ in ways that were not contained in that event, right? You'll do greater things than me. Then when, let's say, we asked a question around patriarchy that you were having a conversation with someone, at some point right now will be the early church.
Yeah.
What if the end of the early church is the first female pope? And in 4,000 years, and you're like, yeah, well, it took 2,000 years for them to figure out how this junk works. Could you believe that? And every Christian running around is like, yeah, that is kind of weird. And they're like, I know, right? So but whenever it happened, it wouldn't be there, right? There was a point where Jan Hus was like, I really think individuals should get to read this junk and think about it. And Wycliffe was like, this is great, we should translate it. And Luther's like, did you hear about a printing press, right? And now there are a whole bunch of Christians that wouldn't even know how to identify someone as a Christian unless they were actually familiar with the story, text, and Jesus. But that wasn't even a possibility. Anyway, so
terrific aside. That was the other thing is, Jack Caputo talks about the name of God as an event. And for those who don't know, in philosophy, an event is a result or an end that is greater than you would expect if you just added up its component parts. When they conflate into something greater, that's like an event in philosophy. And the name of God is an event. If you were just to take a G, an O, and a D and put it side by side, you would never think it could result in what people mean when they say God, right? And so I always like to say to people, the name of God is an event. Anytime the God is in a sentence, it changes the sentence. So for instance, if I said, Trip, I don't want you to wear that hat. That's one kind of sentence.
But it's orange and it's a local baseball team. So I like it.
But what if I said, Trip, God doesn't want you to wear that hat? That's an event. Doesn't
God like the grasshoppers?
Right. That's an event. If I don't like the hat, that's one thing. Right. And this is why at Thanksgiving dinner, families are having so much trouble right now where they can't even talk with each other because once somebody invokes the God, it's an event. So if you say, well, I think, this president's pretty great, that's one thing. But if somebody invokes the name of the God and says, God, this is God's servant, God is using this Balaam, this Cyrus to get God's work done, you've got a freaking event, man. And like I always think about Karl Barth when he talked about the word of God. It's the difference, which he said was an event. And he said it's the difference between a lightning bug and lightning. And to me, that's the difference between I like this president and God likes this president. It's lightning bug and lightning. And when you evoke the name of the God, it is a freaking lightning strike. Right? That's how I think about it.
Oh, that's helpful.
But then Merrill Westphal comes along. And he says about Caputo's theology, he calls it thin soup. And the only reason I bring this up is that when I lead people through this conversation and I facilitate this little worksheet and I give them my example of the kind of faith that I've come to, ground of being, surplus of meaning, they say one of two things. They either say, if that's what God is, it's not enough for me to believe in and orient my life around. It's not compelling. And I get that. If it seems like thin soup to them. It's not meaty enough. And I get it. Or here's the other thing that happens, which I think you'll really like. They say, Bo, or sometimes Pastor Bo, I love this. And I love the theology at this church. It's so open-minded and ecumenical, and I just love it. But when I come to church, it's so freaking boring. I hate the call to worship. I hate the passing of the peace. I hate the hymns. It's so boring.
Wow.
And they say you have great theology, but why is your church service so boring? I don't even want to go on Sunday morning, but I love the theology and it's spiritually life-giving to me. I'm used to, why isn't the church service exciting if the theology is this good?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe we don't understand, but the Holy Ghost is like, look, if your picture of God is the source of all things, that knows intimately each and every creature in their particularity, that which is most problematic and most beautiful about them, holds it tenderly, neighbor, enemy, nature, all of it, and then invites all of us creatures in the next step of flourishing across all the multiplicity and web of beings that exist. If that picture's so beautiful, we can't let you have cheat code with good music and art. We need you to have a organ. We need you to have very, very bland outfits that like we need children when they go in a building to hear this. It's cheating. Like the other people get fun stuff because their God is a jerk. You wouldn't even let that guy babysit. Yours is too good. So what we need is all the kids to have their most boring hour of the week in the building where they hear the greatest vision of humanity and what they can be called into.
We need the liturgy to be so rigid and formal that it sucks all the life out of the vitality and zestiness of your theological presentation.
Yeah. It's like you just got done working out, and you got a good sweat on, and you just chugged a big old cup of cold water, and you're like, oh man, that was so good for me. I'm growing and stuff. Now I just need a shower. But you don't take your clothes off. You just go in, filthy, sweaty, socks and all, and you're in the shower, and you're like, why was the shower not refreshing after such a great time swinging those kettlebells? And it's probably because you have all your clothes on in the shower. But
that's the weirdest analogy you've ever come up with, and seems oddly experiential and self-referential.
Okay, I've only gotten in the shower dressed once, and it was when I was going to pick Harvey Cox up from the airport, and I was like so excited, because he was coming to Claremont, and I lived near the airport, so a lot of times I would pick people up and then come in, and I had only talked to him, like on Zoom once, and I'm like, oh, this is Harvey Cox, because he was like a theologian and a campus minister, and I was like, that would be like the coolest job of all time, because you get to teach classes, but you also get to like have ongoing relationship with students and blah blah blah. And he's written all these books. And I was so excited, and I got in the shower like with all my sleeping clothes on.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it was something. Okay, so go ahead.
Can you so I'm gonna go to the boys' room real quick. I drank way too much coffee because I was so excited about getting to this podcast.
You're like, I'm gonna say hermeneutics later.
Can you introduce the email as our case study?
Okay, you want me to read it?
You can. Yes, sure. Okay. And I'll be right back.
All right, sweet. All right, so Eric, who I told at the beginning of the podcast, mentioned we were talking after live podcast. Grace and I did. Grace G Sun Kim and I did at we did at the Will's Church. We did it at Will's Church in Chapel Hill. Wow. Internet just flickered off and on. If that's what just happened, not exactly sure. But yeah, so Eric came up after and was talking about God, and then I didn't have time at that moment to have a long conversation, and it was a good one. So I said, hey, email me, and then we can do it for TNT. So then Bo, anyway, we've had this conversation. Here's the email that's set up for it. Let me skip all the intro parts. He said, growing up, there was so much that I learned about God that seems so wrong now. While it's tempting to just reject the whole idea of God, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but mindfully choosing my assumptions is tricky. I've noticed that most of us have all kinds of unquestioned assumptions and baggage about God, even the most respected beer campers. The difference is that they're more aware and honest and open about it all. What do I know about God from my experience? Question mark. I've seen positive, loving behavior inspire and spread more positive, loving behavior in others. In a sense, this dynamic is a life of its own, both in front of our own eyes and over time throughout history. Is that what God is? Or just an expression of God? Something else? It makes sense to me that actively trying to help that dynamic along is a good and worthwhile thing to do. Maybe it's the most important thing. Like the Jules song Hands, wow, I guess we know what generation we're talking about. In the end, only kindness matters, and we are God's eyes, God's hands, God's heart. What have I heard from others? John Dominic Crossan has the amazing ability to explain so many historical details and how that led scriptures and traditions that we have today. He makes a lot of sense to me. His explanation of the metaphors underlying currents of the Bible can be a wonderful guide for me when making difficult choices. But is that it? Who, what, or where is God in that? Diana Butler Bass is a generous synthesizer of scripture and history in a way that's inspiring and consistent with Dom and the love dynamic I mentioned above. Scriptural interpretation is good. Do you need God to have good scriptural interpretation? Or is good scriptural interpretation an expression of God? In fact, I could see Diana doing just as well with any other tradition as her source. It's like she is an embodied expression of love in the act of interpretation. The tradition and text only matter insofar as they can kindle and support these active expressions of love. I can get behind the idea such love is worth dedicating my life to, but is that what we mean by God? My spiritual director has many times tried to encourage me to talk to God and relate to God, Jesus Christ, as a person, and I struggle with this. What am I missing to be able to make this connection, or what? He also says that the fact that I am longing to understand this is actually God connecting with me. What do you think? What else? And then, well, the other stuff I don't think is necessarily about this, but yeah, okay, Bo. So there's a couple bits of this that might be. I think it's really clear Eric is very self-aware, right? Like, so at the beginning, that so many people have a host of different unexamined assumptions and baggage when we talk about God, and that there's a difference between there's a gain made when someone becomes conscious and honest and open about their a prioris or the conditions for thinking about God. And throughout it, he talks about this sense of the enactment of love within a tradition, be it how you read the text. And he gives the example of Dom, or looking through the history and stuff with Diana, or all these kinds of things. Each of the different examples, all of them in some way are asking, if we take an event of love, like, where is God in that event? Because in some sense, all the things that come into that event, the past, the text, the traditions, the rituals, the stories, the person's own experience, all that kind of stuff shows up. And then there's the love that kind of comes out of it, like as one gives oneself the love and enacts it, it makes space and possibility for more, right? And you can see that dynamic, but it's like, well, where's God when there's like an event or happening of love? Like, what's the reference point? And it seems that he's sensitive enough to, like, you wouldn't want to just call like God like the thing that randomly shows up and makes the love happen. But how do you even talk about God in relationship to all the things that come into a love event, and what opens up from it? And is anything gained by using the word God, or should you just be like, well, this makes things better, or this is a more beautiful version, or whatever like that. But that dynamic runs through all three vignettes he gives. But I'm interested in what stuck out to you.
I appreciate, first of all, I just really appreciate the thoughtfulness and vulnerability, the transparency of the question. Also, clearly invested in the endeavor, in the process, the journey. So I really appreciated the way that it was framed. And, as from distance, remotely, I don't know what for me would be the direction that I would want to go, but I'll tell you, it has my gears turning. I'm thinking and sort of prayerfully holding this question in my heart, because for me, I just keep contrasting it against my most recent conversation and see somebody who is I'm going to say further along. And I don't mean that in a quantitative, like better. I just mean they've been sitting with this longer. They've been contemplating it, investigating it. And it's interesting to me to see what it looks like at this point in somebody's journey versus when somebody is, I'm going to say, newly knocking down the stones and tipping over the foundations. And they're still in that place of sort of, whether it's angry, not that there's anything wrong with being angry, especially if you feel like you've been manipulated and deceived. But the difference in tone and in posture for me is pretty profound, that when somebody is first in that place of saying, this is all horse shit, and I can't trust the Bible, and I can't trust the tradition, and I don't know why anyone even does this at all. Like, why keep going? Why keep trying? The difference with how this is framed is intriguing to me. And I guess that's the part that really sticks out, is just that different points in the healing process and in the journey, how different it sounds.
Yeah. And one of the things about if all the examples he gives, in a sense, are hermeneutical ones.
Okay.
Right? Like in the example he gives of, he resonates with Crossan, right? Both in like the way he kind of exegetes the text and traditions, and then describes like metaphors make reality. Like which ones you use to describe things end up instantiating themselves, whether it's Caesar is Lord or money or this kind of thing. And then going like, well, yeah, and some metaphors are more or less accurate to reality and more or less compelling for flourishing. And it seems to me like underneath that question, like what's entailed in it is the reality of value and meaning or beauty or justice, right? Like all that metaphors generate reality. Preferencing one over the other is an event of valuation. It's one where you go like, oh, it's actually, this is more just, or this is more beautiful, right? And so there's both like the engine of things like that. We use language in social ways that generate a reality. But then there's the question of how you evaluate the reality that's rendered by the metaphors, right? And that is the prophet's role. That there are better or worse ones. And I think, like, when you think of the places that kind of reflection would lapse into something outside of your hermeneutical category, but to like a metaphysical one, would be like, is the language of justice, love, meaning, value, or whatever purely aesthetic difference or preferential fan fiction, or is there does the word good or justice have a referent beyond the metaphor, right? What's it being held accountable to? And there's different versions of it. There's like Kant has one, Caputo has one, right? The undeconstructible via Derrida. The prophets have one. Like, so, there's lots of ways of doing it, but like, to me, that sticks out because it seems to me there's at least 4 places that 4 parts of our experience or questions that come up that that aren't going to get settled by an empirical explanation or a historical one. So, like, the origin of the cosmos, right? We have our space-time, and we can talk about it, and we have different interpretations of evidence and data and all that kind of thing, but it's not like in our particular space-time there is now empirical explanation of where the space-time came from. There are more or less, the counts can be more or less cohesive with what we know at this given point, and that information is changing really quickly. So there's that. There's the origin of life, like how billions of years into it life emerges. There's a couple different accounts of it, but exactly how chemicals decide to start interacting in ways that generate, biological life. There's that. Look, consciousness, like that it's like to be a something, and other things have in a first person perspective, and that consciousness is there. Did it magically get interjected into creation? Is it like an emergent reality that was potentially there the whole time? Like, is it really a fake thing? And like, there are lots of, but like, that question raises something. And I think also the reality of meaning or value, like valuative judgments of difference where something's preferred beyond just like one's personal taste, like that is an experience humans have, whether it's real or not, is a question that doesn't get settled by its reality, right? And in all 4 of those areas, I think when I think of like using the word God, or like what this concept entails, I think if you take all 4 of those mysteries, there's a more parsimonious account of the world metaphysically, when with God as the answer to, as a universe, a universe that has a source, and such. It makes more sense, but oftentimes, right, that concept of God, that you can just, I mean, it's not like I have to tell you what Tripp is thinking, what he means by it. But if you have not thought through the concept of God, but you're asking questions within the given tradition, right? Like both of the person you talked to, Eric here, so much of that concept of God is informed more broadly when you think about quest for truth, reality, science, philosophy, all those kinds of things. But and so if the concept of God, it hasn't been worked through, then it's hard to find connection points. Other visions of God, those connection points within traditions, you can find connections to. So like when he gives these hermeneutical examples, right, of an event within interpretation, an event within history, all of which generate more love. If all the past events of interpretation of that text and things are flooding into a moment, and all the layers of power, oppression, and possibilities, if you're inheriting all the past, and the question is, how do you relate to the past that opens up the greatest future towards love? Like, which is, kind of like what he describes as Dom doing, just, a process person. Is just like, yep, that's a description of how God and the world relate in every moment of becoming. Like, the past shows up, you have the responsibility of your own agency in whatever limited way it is to respond to not just your own valuation of the horizon of possibility, but the lure, call, invitation. And in doing so, you're enacting or making present the invitation of the divine. And now that event becomes a part of the whole story that's inherited in the next moment. Right. And so, like, just shifting how you describe, like, how you understand the divine turns a question of where is God in this to, hey, you just did God. And the same thing, I think, with the example he gives of Diana, right? Like, at least from my perspective, I was like, hey, you did God. So yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, man. I'm smiling because I have two things, stories in my head. One of the times that I have this conversation with somebody that I get to see every other year. I see them every other year, and we've been having this conversation for about 10 years. Because you mentioned all of his examples primarily are hermeneutical, right? They're interpretive. I have this friend who just I don't know how to describe it. You know, when you are raised with a very concrete ontological concept of God, it can be tough to revamp that and renovate that. And so this friend doesn't like hermeneutics. And in the past, because we were both charismatic, would argue with me and saying experiences don't need interpreted. They're true. Like if this happens, you don't need to think about like how you're viewing it. That's a true experience. And now this person has moved 180 degrees away from that. And every time we try and talk, it has just happened earlier this summer. I said, there's this great book called To Each Its Own Meaning. It was written in 1999. It's by, McKinsey and Haynes. To Each Its Own Meaning. It's $15 right now on Amazon. And this person snapped at me and said, you bring that up every time we talk. And it was the funniest thing because I was like, well, no, I didn't. But the fact that I keep coming back to the fact that different genres, right? It was really funny to me that if you're not familiar with just a category of the hermeneutical or just an interpretive lens, and you think that you're just looking at something in its raw state and it doesn't need to be interpreted, that there's no lens between you and what you're viewing, it can be really both frustrating and intimidating to try and step back and say, how am I seeing this? Through what filter am I running this? By what am I evaluating it? So that's why I was smiling when you said all of his examples were hermeneutical. But the thing I wanted to tell you that I thought you'd like the most is about 20 years ago, I noticed a massive change. When people would come because they wanted to get married, I remember the first time, I think it was in 2005, that I had a request to do a wedding for a couple who lived together. And in the 20 years since then, in the last, I would say 5 or 10 years, I have never done a wedding for a couple that didn't live together. Like in 20 years, that has changed so radically.
And the average age went up dramatically.
Yeah. But in that same window, and I don't know if these are connected, but it feels connected to me because they're in the same encounters, is people would say, I'm not religious. Neither of us is religious, but our parents will really only support us getting married. They'd really like it if it would be by a minister. I'd say, okay. And I'd say, do you want it in a church building, or are we doing this at the park, or where are we doing this? And almost always it's a destination wedding out at a vineyard or golf course or something, a different venue. And so I will ask the question, hey, talk to me about weddings that you've liked that you've been to that you've liked, and talk to me about weddings that you went to you didn't like. And one of the things that always comes up is the God talk. How much God is there going to be? And so sometimes I will offer to a couple, do you want me to do, like, they don't know what post-structural, they don't know hermeneutics, they don't know. And I'll say, hey, do you want me to do like a less religious vocabulary? And for instance, instead, every time in the liturgy that it would say God, I can substitute in a more generic term like eternal or divine or transcendent or, right, the one. And they said, oh, that would be so helpful, because all of our friends are sort of dreading a religious ceremony, that they're going to have to endure it, and just weather the God storm sort of thing. And one of the interesting things is, as I have refined this and made it more, I call it more approachable, you always, Trip, have two opposite reactions. The one is, invariably, some very religious person will come up to me and say, why did you dilute or downplay the God stuff? And that's not how they say it, but that's what they mean. But I will also usually have somebody who's been to a lot of weddings or is thinking about their own or something say, I've never heard that stuff before. I've never thought about it in that way. The highest compliment I ever received was a 70-year-old gay man came up to me after the ceremony and said, when you wanted to pray for the couple, I thought to myself, oh, shit. Like, oh, no. And he said, that was the very first time my entire life I've heard a prayer that I said amen at the end of. I've never agreed with a prayer in my entire life. But when you talked about sending them our best, hoping for them the best, being able to be there for them with our best, to that I can say amen. Like, I want the best for them. And so I've realized that by doing this, whatever you want to call demythologized thing, Trip, there is something about the God. I'm telling you, dude, like when it's, as well as I do, when it's in a ceremony, it's like poking people in the eye if they're not into it. It evokes, right? It's evocative, naming this thing. And when you make it more generic, demythologized, more approachable, however you want to say it, it just allows people, it's more open-ended and more open-handed, and it allows more people to enter in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't have a problem using that language outside of those kind of contexts. Like, okay. I just don't do that for weddings, Eucharist, baptism. And I think part of it is, this might totally be Baptist, right? But like when you're doing a wedding, you're an agent of the state. And the only way you get to do it is if you're a minister of the gospel. So I always tell people, like, I can only sign your marriage certificate as minister of the gospel. So like, mine is rather expansive, but I don't have integrity doing this if that's not what I'm doing.
Really?
And
wow,
we did hundreds of weddings in Los Angeles, and they're but it's such a big church. You do 3 a weekend. There's not like lots of debates about this stuff.
Okay.
And so I knew I was going to use the language. So my sermon would be like, here's why we treasure this language. And you could get similar responses,
Interesting.
For Christians, what we're celebrating today deserves nothing less than a God who is love, right? Or there are lots of ways you do it. But
nice.
What pops in my head is like two things. One, in all those things, it's surprising how many people want I don't know what you call it. It's like you want the gifts of a tradition, but like as a tourist at life transition moments, right? The same thing happened. Like think of like the debate at mainline Protestants about confirmation. I try to get rid of half of them at the beginning of it because I'm like, they're just the parents are just making them do this so they can get out of coming to church. Like, how am I supposed to do a confirmation class where half the people don't care? It's like, it's not one. Like you're helping them tell the truth that they don't actually want to confirm their baptism rather than watering it down so that none of them actually have to do anything Jesus has ever called his disciples to do in order to get through it. Right. Like, but see, I experience in those spaces, if I'm told they're expecting me to dilute things, I'm like, why? Like like you're saying I want to come to a tradition that's 2,000 years old, and I need you to help me make sacred a life transition, marriage, birth, whatever. And what I would like for you to do is to accommodate me while you perform something that for you is a sacrament. And I don't honor your tradition enough, the language, the stories, the rituals enough. I need you to accommodate to me and my personal wants, but I want all the perks of it. And
oh my gosh!
And then mainline Protestants are like, that's great. We don't care about what we dedicate our whole lives to. I'll chuck all of it. And I'm going to preach a sermon on the most important day where you are promising to love each other like Christ loves the church. And I won't say Christ or church, even though that's what I think you're doing, but I'll translate it because there's actually nothing the actual language, symbols, and doctrines of Christianity contribute here. It can actually all be articulated in really vague language of California with love on top. That's what mainline Protestants do. And then I'm like, well, no wonder they don't care. No wonder no one wants to go to your place. And any of the important moments, you can simultaneously sound exactly the same as their friend who would do it on the beach. And no one would even know what religion you are, except for maybe the stole you have on. But I'm sure you put on your rainbow one that day so that you didn't have a cross on it or a dove. Like, I don't have a problem with it's just, to me, I'm sitting there going like, just like I mentioned earlier, like minimal viable God concept. Yeah. I'm like, why do we just get rid of everything and then be like, but you could still have the perks? Like, it doesn't matter to me either. I can do a wedding and never say Jesus. Like, they're like, and you're a minister and you're in a church. Oh yeah. Historical accident. It's just, this is always what goes through my head. And,
wow. That was the best unscripted game of Au Contraire, mon frere, we have ever had.
I could play the other side. I just sit there and be like, here's the result of us doing this. Wow. The result of us doing this is you have really beautiful theology that you can't even use at a wedding or at the Eucharist or when you're handing out food. That's what mainline and the most boring worship service. So they have the worst retention rate of religion in America. And most of the people in their pews voted for Donald Trump, even though the ministers didn't. That's what ambiguous, like theology without convictions that is strategically ambiguous does, is that mainline Protestants managed to vote for Donald Trump and think there's nothing that Christian tradition contributes when they do the Eucharist or a wedding or confirmation. Wow. And I'm just sitting there going like, well, no wonder no one cares, because you don't even think there's something important enough about this. And I feel like a curmudgeony old man when I say things like this. But I think the result of it is that it's like saying, I don't care if my grandkid knows how to say Jesus Christ. That's what the result actually is, right? Like, if you just track the data and the transformation, if you want to know what, like, you don't think it matters enough, even when they're getting married, to say, like, the definition of love, we're just going to take 1 Corinthians 13 out of context. You know, the love passage would be like, this is completely unrelated to the fact that it's in a letter. And 300 words later, this letter says, all things, sin, law, and death, become subject to the Son to the Father, so that God is all in all. Well, that has nothing to do, apparently, and we can just talk about love in the abstract, when the letter also was like, well, you know what normal love looks like? This is what love looks like in the Christian tradition, precisely because it comes through weakness. You are going to have a relationship. You think what power looks like. Here's what it looks like. Oh, we aren't going to do that part. Let's just say love is patient. Love is kind. We can put this on an Instagram meme and no one knows what it is. It's just spiritual. Then I'm like, well, no wonder no one cares, because I'm not sure you do. Maybe if you...
I am going to concede this round of sparring only because of this one thing. My approach in the early days, about a third of the people I would do the ceremony for would come and eventually participate and be transformed in both their relationship and right. But I can honestly say in the last 10 years, 0% have ever come back, come into community, or participated in the tradition again. So I'm going to concede this one just based on sure quantitative data. I think you're right.
And I'll just say that's why I changed my mind. Like, I have no problem doing, like, there's nothing about Trip. Like, you know what I mean? Like, Tripp's experience, a process person with a high Christology, experiences and interprets all enactments of things that move towards love or justice as events of the divine life. That's true. I have a whole freaking book on it. Like, where it's like, you can have a high Christology and recognize these things. They're participating in the divine self-investment that is ultimately recognized in the proleptic event of Christ's resurrection. So Tripp thinks all those things. It is actually just a pragmatic one. And my natural tendency, here's why you saying that. My natural tendency was, when I was in the South, to do that all the time. Because when people heard God and stuff there, they're thinking of, you know, that kind of MAGA-lish, like the person that thinks Obama's not a citizen. If you think of like 2008 when I was moving to California, you get to California, a lot of those people don't have any reference of Christianity or religion whatsoever.
Right.
And so, you know, it just like that shift in context was huge. And I think more like when I think of like who joined the church and are active doing stuff and like their life becomes more Christ-like, it were there was a strong take coming from the church about who God is and how God's active in the world and how we can join God, was a compelling part, and was doing the, like, I try to be accommodating to everyone's God baggage, and then not even knowing I was a Christian. They would have the like, well, that's neat, but I'm going to sleep in, or that's neat, but I'll just give some money to this, or whatever. It was the move towards active participation in ways was connected to strong claims. And then the watching the impact of the generational shift when mainline Protestants in general like shed all the they shed all the language and stuff, but not the trappings. Lord knows they can't I think we could all shed some trappings of liturgical boringness.
I love when you hit this gear. And you know what's funny? Can I just say, I love that you never hit this gear when it comes to things like Husserl and Wittgenstein. You only ever hit this gear in practical theology where the rubber meets the road. Can I just say that?
Do you want me to talk about later Husserl?
No, I don't. Hey, I have something at the top of the hour, so I just want to reiterate something you said at the very beginning of this. We cannot do this for every email you get.
Who knows? Eric might be like, that wasn't what I was asking.
That's not what I was asking at all.
That's different than what I was thinking. Yeah. Well, anyway, this has been fun, Bo. And feel like I got myself all worked up.
Well, you've inspired me. I'm going to go to this thing that I have in 10 minutes, but I'll still be thinking about what you just said.
Well, I don't know if that's an asset or not to what's happening in 10 minutes, but I can tell you there have been meetings where I wish I had something else to think about. And yeah, but thank you all for joining. It's been cool seeing all of you over on Substack.